Many of us these days, maybe increasingly, experience a kind of unease, anxiety, suffering that we might then express in words like a need for more balance. Sometimes this is kind of specifically external. We notice that, like work-life balance, for example, most common and obvious. Or it might be oriented more of in emotional, finding more emotional balance, and we tend to think of them as separate, because we tend to think of the world as separated between internal and external. So, to begin with, it's helpful to break down that distinction, or see through the illusion of that distinction. And so, if there's an imbalance in your activities, your daily activities, your work life, how it is you're managing time, that will have an impact. It can have an impact on your emotional well-being, psychological well-being, and vice versa. So they're not separate. And because we typically do see things in this very sort of functional, materialist sort of way, we're always arranging the seats and then rearranging the seats and then trying to get just the right setup, so just the right external circumstances, which of course we might be able to do, and it's important obviously to take care of our life in that way, that aspect of our life, but it's everybody's experience that won't be sustainable. Things change. It's the nature of things, so that they're always changing. So then when we look inside, often because we aren't really looking deep enough, stepping back far enough to see the true self, so we're operating on the level of experience, even when it's, so-called internal. So then the object becomes like establishing emotional balance, psychological balance, and from the point of view of the mind is convinced that's possible, but actually it's really not. Again, you might find some sense of relief. It'll be temporary. I'm certainly not suggesting that it isn't a good idea to reflect kind of on an emotional level, psychological level, on how it is that you might be reactive, how it is that you might not be taking a moment, considering your response, for example. So, I'm not saying we just throw that out the window, but I am suggesting that ultimately, really the only way to find balance, and it isn't something that needs to be developed, there's already a you that's completely balanced, even in the most unbalanced situation, seemingly unbalanced situation. So the you that's balanced is the you, the naturally awake you, which is awareness or pure consciousness itself. It's always available. And that balance is not a balance of trying to manipulate external circumstances, not trying to manipulate, move towards circumstances that we like, or move away from circumstances that we don't like. That may be the outcome at some point, but it's not the starting point. So typically we look externally, either in kind of clearly external circumstances, or the next spot we might look, or could be vice versa, one or the other, it's the beginning, or we might look at our emotional well-being, but that's still really an object of, it's an experience, our emotions, our thoughts. The starting place for balance is to learn to step back and be aware of, notice what's aware of imbalance, the feeling of imbalance. So let's actually do that for a moment. So whether you're experiencing it presently or not, if you happen to be, maybe you clicked on this YouTube because you are experiencing a feeling of imbalance. And even if not, even if it isn't something that's present right now, I'm sure you can bring up that sense, having gone through it at some point in your life. So just bring that up. Notice how that feels. So maybe an anxiousness, maybe fear in it. However that comes up for you. And you'll notice it in the body somehow. It's going to express itself in the body. And fundamentally, that's where it's going to really, how it arises. And we attach a story to it. And if we want to perpetuate it, we cycle the story. So now, to the extent there's a story, you have that. And you have body sensations. And now, from either one or both, just step back and notice what it is that's aware of the feeling of anxiety, for example, worry, fear. So you don't need to make the fear, the anxiety go away. In fact, it's completely not what we're doing. We're actually open to it, welcoming to it, in the sense that we're acknowledging that it's happening. This is what's happening now. And notice if you can open and relax, step back into awareness itself. Awareness actually doesn't have an attitude about anxiety, in this case, or fear, worry. So see if you can just rest in that place that's completely aware. The feeling will do what it's going to do. It may, once you see through and resist our habitual pattern to identify with feeling or thought, perception, concepts, that all of them have a transparency, you can see through them. They're not solid. They don't last. They can't really even be found in a certain kind of way. So we can establish balance, a balance that is awareness itself, which is, in this broad sense, undifferentiated. So even if it's aware of a feeling, it's undifferentiated in the sense that it doesn't have a preference for what it is that's arising. It's not avoiding, it's not moving toward, it's simply present to. And that is always balanced. It's an imperturbable balance. It's not a fixed location, so it is not on the verge of moving one way or another way. It doesn't have a shape. It's not lopsided to one side or the other side. It doesn't have edges. Doesn't feel endangered. So it's always in balance. So this doesn't necessarily resolve the external circumstances in your life that still exist, job, family, whatever it might be, whatever the circumstances that are arising that we then are in relationship to in a way that creates this sense of feeling unbalanced. So I'm merely suggesting that the place to find balance is always available, and then from that place we make adjustments. From that place there's clarity. Some things you'll be able to adjust, other things you won't. So there are certain things that come with being alive, making choices, being in relationship in the world, that from time to time might be so-called unbalanced. So it isn't the circumstance so much. Where there's a chance to change that, we want to have the clarity to be able to do that in a discerning way, in a way in which we're in service to the whole self, not the small self, not the thinking mind that's constantly feeling out of balance because it's constantly seeking or avoiding something. So from that point of view, it's impossible to find real balance. But if we start with the balance that is imperturbable, that is our nature, then it's easier to see what could be adjusted, what's not adjustable, and then make changes if necessary, if possible, in the service to the whole self and to those that we're in relationship with. And where it's not, no worries at all. Just move ahead.